We're here in Pothouse Spring with Philippe Aimey of the Alliance Party for Progress, APP. Good morning, sir.
Morning. How you doing, Tef?
I am great, man. How are you?
I'm good. Appreciate you taking your time.
Oh, definitely, man. Very interesting to see you on this new journey. I just have a couple questions for you. I'm going to start by asking why you're running for the constituency of St. John. As a resident, if I was a resident of St. John, why should I be confident in you being the MP for St. John?
As a resident, well, let me start by saying as a resident of St. John myself, so I'm not just, running for St. John. I actually live in St. John. I work in St. John. St. John is really part of my life, 150%. And one of the things that I've realized as a resident is that, there's been a main focus over the years on what they call the Sergeant Street Route, the main artery taking you from, let's say St. George, Charro Bridge, through the Ashbury, right up to the top. And, there's always been that development in that area of St. John. And I've not really seen over the years a focus on what they call the outskirts. So under the hill, you got the Martins Bay, you got the Zores, Foster Hall, Glen Burnie, Barflan, Newcastle. Other places on the other side, you have Kendall, let's say Ashford Tenantry to some extent. So one of the things that I always wanted to do was to see how we could, take programs, take development to the less, what you call the beaten path. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to focus on. Outside of that, community activity is something that I'm a big part of. And over the last, I would say, not just 2 years because of COVID, but even prior to that, there's been a major reduction in kind of community activities that I've been seeing in the community. And idle hands, that's where you get into trouble. And there are a lot of youth in St. John who are extremely talented in a number of areas. And I firmly believe community programs, that's one of the ways, that's one of the key ways that you could get youth involved in positive directions. Growth, development, that's one of the things that are really, really critical. Community activities, there's so much things that spur from community activities. You can even go into the economic benefits, but that's another conversation. But overall, I think the bedrock of any constituency, any society has to be a real focus on community efforts and activities. So that's pretty much what we want to bring to the table, not just in terms of the things that we often want to see from a government, which is, infrastructure development. That is major, that is key as well. So I'm not saying that I don't want to focus on infrastructural development, but I'm saying that those are things that are commonplace. A government, at the end of the day, you have the Barbados Water Authority, who, regardless of which government is in power, is going to do what it has to do for the country. You have MTW, that's another government institution. So regardless of which party is in power, the work of MTW is going to continue. So I don't always want to focus on infrastructural development, because whether I am here or not, whether the current MP is there or not, it doesn't matter. These works are going to continue, especially if residents are willing to agitate for, to get certain roads done and bring attention. If you're willing to bring attention to some of these problem areas, they're going to be addressed. So what we really need, I think, for St. John is a fresh vision, a fresh focus, new ideas to really bring, I would say, concrete plans to the constituency. So that's where it's coming. I really want to offer my services in that regard to the constituencies, to the people of St. John. I think that's really where it could be of benefit, of service, trying to really help with the youth and trying to bring programs to bring the community back together. I think that's the key for me right now and what I'm trying to bring to the table.
So you mentioned some of the things in your 5-point plan, in your manifesto. And in your 5-point plan, you touch on agriculture, entrepreneurship, sports, technology, and community activities. And I know that you've always been involved in community, so we'll touch on that a little bit later. I also want to ask you, to further make me confident as a St. John resident, what have you done? What have you actually done before in your life? Some of the activities, community activities that you would have gotten behind, any programs, any entrepreneurship, anything that you would have been involved in that will reflect you being the perfect person to execute the things in your plan?
Okay, well, let's see, a bit of history. What have I done? Let's talk about in St. John, mainly in St. John. One of the main things that I've been focusing on in St. John is been entertainment for a number of years. So like I've been telling people, I don't normally like to talk about myself and stuff, but I'm 36 now. And when I was 19, the first thing I would have done in St. John would have been to bring Norris Man to Barbados. And like I was saying at the launch of our party the other night, At that time, a lot of people were trying to figure out, like, where would you want to bring a reggae artist from Jamaica, and take them to perform in St. John? Why not go someplace, more palatable, someplace for easier access? And my thing has always been Barbados is 166 square miles. It's a small place, and there's nowhere in Barbados that takes you more than 30 minutes traveling distance, and I've always felt that St. John, like any other parish, deserves to have quality entertainment. So I've always been really, focused on bringing the best DJs, the best, quality entertainment to the parish. So we can talk about some of the events that I've done, especially in the Gore Hill area, the zone area. That's a venue that would have been left behind by David Thompson, the late David Thompson, a number of years ago. That's one of the spaces that we normally use in St. John for cultural events. So we can talk about that. And then there's also my involvement with the St. John Cultural Cricket Club. When I left playing elite cricket for Wanderers, one of the main things that I wanted to do was always come back home to play cricket and assist the club there as much as possible. So I've been there for, I would say, about 4 to 5 years now. That's been going good. We're trying to get a youth program off the ground because once the older fellas stop playing, we want to make sure that the club itself doesn't die. That club has a very rich legacy in terms of cricket in Barbados. We're talking about more than 40, 50 years of consistent representation for the parish in the BCA competition. So that's important to me as well. In terms of entrepreneurship, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in St. John who have businesses from their homes and stuff. And one of the things that I've been really trying to do over the years is to bring the entrepreneurs outside of the home environment into one central location, move around the parish for what we call farmers markets, flea markets, that type of stuff. So we've done a few of those, and we want to continue doing those in the future because I think if we can get, I would say 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10 entrepreneurs coming together on a monthly basis to move around the parish, and give residents a chance to come out and support businesses that they know for sure are homegrown from within the parish. So that's another thing that we want to focus on as well. So I guess I would say most of my commitment over the years to St. John has been centered mainly around entrepreneurship, entertainment, community activities, and so on. And that's what I want to continue doing. Like I said, that's where my focus really is, in community activities and bringing some sports programs and stuff to the youth as well.
Okay, yes, I definitely know you for your involvement in these areas. The former MP for the area, what has he done that you've liked, actually, as a resident?
Right.
And what are some of the main things that you think he has left out? I'm sure you would have mentioned some in what you were speaking on previously, but let's dive a little bit more deeply.
Okay, so as a resident, if I'm honest, the water situation that St. John would have experienced for a number of years, as a resident, that's something that would have frustrated me just like anybody else. But I understood that it was a long process because, I have, a lot of good brethren, sisters who work at the Barbados Water Authority for a number of years. And, from talking to them, taking your complaints and venting your frustration, you begin over time to understand what it is that they're dealing with. And, bringing water from over all the way, I think like Bushy Park, Vineyard, they call it, to St. John, that's a long distance. That's a lot of work. It's something that took more than 3.5 years, something that took more than 5, 6, 7 years. So having seen that situation come to a situation now where water is flowing through the taps, that's one of the things that I'm grateful for. But I understand that it wasn't a quick fix. So I'm not sure I want to necessarily, say congratulations to the former MP for that, because I would prefer to, pretty much send congratulations to the guys who I know would have been working over a number of years. I think sometimes we get a little mixed up when we talk about representation. So yes, there are roads that have been done in the parish, the water issues fixed and so on. But again, like I always tell people, it's not that I'm not grateful. It's just I understand who it is that's doing the work. I understand who it is that's actually putting the sweat into making these changes. So I think sometimes we heap praise on the politicians without understanding that when we do that, we're ignoring the people who actually, put the shoulder to the wheel, who actually have the expertise, who actually understand how to lay a pipe. You understand where I'm coming from? Those are the people that deserve our praise. And I think I want to take this opportunity now to say thanks to all the guys and the women working at the Barbados Water Authority, Bournemouth and beyond. They would have worked really hard to get the water situation fixed. Poolwoods, that's just above where I live. So that's one of the things I'm happy about in terms of seeing Poolwoods debush properly and actually turn that into a recreational facility. But what I would say again is that, I've listened over the last few weeks, and I'm seeing people, take credit for a lot of things without understanding the real foundation of how these things come about. So when we talk about Poets, I can't, talk about Poets unless I talk about the 3 guys from St. John. 3 Rasta men who decided, look, this is a great space, 11 acres of land, and we are not going to wait on anybody to debush it or recognize the vision for this space. Those guys went with cutlasses, 3 men in North. They went and they started to cut the bush. And talking about Eifert, John D and Aimey. Anybody that's really, into St. John and knows what's happening with St. John would know that what I'm saying is 100% true. These are 3 guys from the parish who didn't ask nobody anything, just decided, look, this is a beautiful space and we think something should be done about it. And they went. Obviously, they got assistance after. But
I was just going to ask if the office for the MP, for the constituency, if it was involved in any way.
Oh, for sure. But this is what I'm saying. This is
after the fact.
This is prior to even the current MP. I'm talking about even prior to that.
It's been ongoing.
So it's been ongoing, It's something that came to a pause. So again, I think, Mr. Griffith has been fortunate, I think, to be on the end of I would say, some really good national projects. The Clean and Green project that we're seeing, that's not exclusive to St. John. That's something that's happening all over the island.
National.
That's a national cleanup campaign. So I think it's good that we were on the receiving end of some of that support as well. And that's generally it. The main thing that I want to see in St. John right now, like I said, is a focus on some of the areas that have been forgotten about. Call it Savannah, Martins Bay, Foster Hall, Glen Burnie, Ashford, Tenantry, Kendall, Featherbed Lane. These places are really on the outskirts. We're talking coastal or we're talking close to St. Philip. So it's easy sometimes to, forget about these places that are, like I said, off of the main road. So that's one of the main things that I would like to see going into those areas. The last few weeks I've been hearing a lot about neglect. I've been hearing a lot about, and not just, people don't just want, like I said, roadworks and these things. People genuinely want a hands-on approach, uplifting the youth, uplifting the community. So I'll give you an example. When I visited, call it Savannah last week, speaking to some of the older guys in the area, yes, they want to see roadworks and different things, but what I realized is that the most important thing to the people in that community is connecting and passing on the knowledge between the older guys and the younger guys. So we're talking about, call it Savannah, close to Concept Bay, that's on the coast. Those guys are into fishing, diving, and they're seeing a disconnect between what the older guys were able to do in terms of diving, which is, another level above swimming, and the younger guys who want to do it, but there's that disconnect. They need equipment. They need some sort of structured program that says, look, we're going to come in. These are the guys that know about diving, free diving, and so on. You guys want to learn. We're going to create a program where we can bring these guys together. Because 10, 15 years down the road, we don't want to know that tradition has died in College Savannah. That doesn't make sense. Something that's been going for a number of years. So we need to really be focused on the community, go in, research, learn these communities, and listen to the residents. Because I have my own ideas for St. John, but the residents themselves have their own ideas too. They know what they want to see develop in their communities, So we need to take the time to really listen to the constituents, spend that time on the ground, listening to what they're saying. And I've not been to every place in St. John as yet because, the election has been called, the snap election is short, and I'm not trying to canvass St. John in a matter of days. The real work for me begins after the election is over. That's when the real work begins. So we're keeping it simple, but we've been able to really kind of pinpoint some of the key things that residents in the area want. Like I said, Poole, Cherry Grove, Henley, Coach Hill, Gall Hill. These are the what we call the popular places in St. John. I really wanted to start my journey of representation in St. John by, doing the opposite to what we've seen all these years, by starting, like I said, on the outskirts, some of these forgotten communities. That's pretty much it in that area.
Sounds about right. I would ask you, why do you think some of these areas have been forgotten? But I guess I know. I think the road you might go down there anyway. So
I mean, it's a lot of variables. I mean, it's not just one or two things. Like I said, physically, I could tell you that it's much easier to remember something that you're seeing often. So I would pretty much leave it there. Some of these places I'm talking about, like I said, you're not going to go there unless your intention is to head in that direction. It's not some place that you're passing to get to somewhere else. You understand? So while I do understand that part, the fact remains is that we gotta be mindful that St. John is it's a full space. It's a full space, and we need to make sure we put our hands, and some focus on all the areas in St. John. We don't want anybody in St. John to feel as though there's more attention being paid to one area than the other. Like I said, Barbados is small. So if you're talking about one constituency, that's even smaller. So we need to be able to, like I said, make sure that nobody is feeling left out of the process of representation.
All right. You yourself, you've conducted many interviews. You focus a lot on history, the reason why we have a lot of the issues that we have today. You like to dive into the history and connect the two, so that people could see why things are how they are.
Mm-hmm.
I would have expected you to run independently, just naturally. Not saying that there's anything wrong with running with a party, but I know you would have spoken out before about the two-party tandem, just BLP, DLP, BLP, DLP, how it's not much of a choice, that there's just a culture that's been built, and yes, there may be progress in some areas, but the issues that would arise from a system like that, I felt like you wouldn't want to be a part of. So what is the Alliance Party for Progress bringing that's different to what they're bringing, and why did you decide to run with them as opposed to being independent?
Right, okay. So that's a really good question, Tef. It's a really good question. Why the APP, why didn't run as independent? Okay, so I always wanted to get into representation. Like, you would know that, the sort of work I've been doing is essentially representation in some, however we want to look at it, that is representation in some way. So I understand and I love the journey of Pan-Africanism. What I love about Pan-Africanism is that it's kind of all-encompassing. When I study the works of Marcus Garvey especially, he has not really ever been in a position where he is upset with one religion or upset with another religion. The core of Pan-Africanism remains the development of us. And, so you could be Muslim, you could be Christian, you could be Seventh-day, you could be Rastafari. As long as you are genuinely about the development of our race, I think that's the main indicator. So I've always tried to, represent that, what we call the masses, the Black Bajans, Afro Bajans. Some people obviously have different ways of terming us. But I always say, whatever makes you comfortable. But at the end of the day, people know who I mean and who I'm referring to. So there's always been that, basis to me has always been that type of thinking. So getting into politics, like any other Bajan, like, I've become exhausted, where the reality of what we see in Barbados is that there's a very small percentage of people who control the wealth, who are able to have tremendous opportunities to grow at a faster pace. That's a fundamental problem for me. Not that they're given these opportunities, but that they're the only ones who seem to get these opportunities. So it's always been trying to promote an idea that in a 95% Black country, there needs to be a greater distribution of the wealth, and not just wealth in terms of money, but wealth in terms of opportunities, in terms of financial literacy. So wealth isn't just, that paper money. We're not just talking about that. Wealth is a whole set of other things, even in terms of, I would say, again, the sort of opportunities, again, that are available to inner city youth, to youth in rural areas. We see other people getting entirely different opportunities, having a totally different experience. So if you go to the average Bajan in Barbados right now and ask, do you think that there's one Barbados or two? Most Barbadians, if they're honest, will say to you, well, they got two Barbados. But again, if you go to Russia, you got two Russias. You got two Chinas, you got two Trinidadians, you got two Jamaicans. It's not something that's unique to Barbados. But at the end of the day, this is where I live, and this is where I choose to pay my attention. And I think we can do a lot better in terms of the distribution of wealth in Barbados. So I often hear people say things like, one of the reasons why small contractors don't get these big contracts is because of the inability to do this work or to operate at a certain level. But what we realized over the years in Barbados is that the big contractors get the contract, and they're so busy that they go turn around and hire a small contractor to do the same job. that they just told us that the small contractor is not technically able to do. So I had to ask myself, is it really that these small contractors can't get this work done? Or is it that they're unable to secure the bid? I had to ask myself this question. And when you look at it, the reality is just that these small fellas can't get the contract. But they can get the subcontract to do the work. So we have to ask ourselves as a nation if that is fair, if that is justice. And I personally don't think it is. I think we have a situation where, again, the politics is governed by campaign donations. And if you don't get campaign donations, you can have a miserable campaign. You can have a miserable campaign. That is if your approach to campaigning is the traditional approach of going out there with enough posters, big stage, enough entertainment, dub plates, buying this, buying that. If that is your approach, then the campaign financing becomes necessary. Now, if your approach is one where you want to take substance, you want to take issues, you want to represent the people, you want to do something different, then the campaign donation doesn't become such a big issue, in my opinion. But then you have a situation where the public may be accustomed to a certain approach as well. Now, I've not had that problem. So far since I've been canvassing, guys want to buy me drinks. They're happy to see me involved in the process and stuff, and I've not had the experience that we often hear about. So I think that's why getting into this journey was so important for me, because sitting on the outside is a lot easier to assume that you know what's happening, on the ground what's happening. So putting myself in this position now, I'm able now to see things from a different perspective. And I want to get now to the other part of the question, the APP. Why the APP? Now, Heru Everton Holligan, who's somebody he's running in St. George South. This is some person I've respected for a very long time. Heru's into holistic health and, into doing lectures on generational wealth and building family and unity and stuff like that. So, observing Heru for a little while in the UPP, because remember it's an alliance now. Prior, he was in the UPP. That's under the leadership of Didnt Eastman. And, having conversation with him, I was always able to see Heru, pretty much not change his approach, not change his tone, his stance on certain issues. And, it piqued my curiosity. And leading into the election when it was called, Heru gave me a call and he asked me if I would be interested in representing St. John. And, my initial response was, if I do, get into politics, I gotta do it as an independent, And we had a lengthy conversation. And what I decided to do was, use this opportunity to learn, to gain some experience, especially from Didnt Eastman. I had a conversation with them as well. When I say them, I mean Miss Eastman and also the leader of the party, who is Reverend Adley now. So the UPP and the PDP, they've joined into the Alliance Party for Progress. Right. And so I had to really explain to them what I do, what I'm about, show them 1 or 2 videos to make sure that they know, what Catch a Fire has been about for the last few years.
Make sure one of them was in the videos to begin with.
Yeah, to begin with, yeah. And to my surprise, they were inspired by the type of content that I was producing. They understand the type of representation that I've been chastising and the type of representation that I think the people of Barbados deserve. And I felt comfortable, listening to them also explain their own experiences and what they plan to do with the party and so on. I felt comfortable joining the APP, the Alliance Party for Progress. And, they're really bringing something to the public, which is, what we call 95% politics. Politics geared and designed to uplift the masses. I think the BLP and the DLP have not been brave enough and bold enough to really take this stance. And I'm talking about true upliftment that, creates a better balance in the society. So, we hear the current government boasting and bragging about the trust loan facility and some of the things that they're doing for entrepreneurs. But, I really want people to understand that entrepreneurship is more than vending. There are people in Barbados with ideas that the startup for the idea is way beyond $5,000. So if you're saying to a young entrepreneur in Barbados that, yes, come, we want to hear your ideas, etc., but that entrepreneur knows full well that going to the trust loan is not the answer. That's going to create a bigger problem for that person. So we have a lot of people in Barbados sitting down with tremendous ideas who are terrified, Tef, to put that idea to the public for fear of different reasons. And again, I want to stress that we're not just talking about capital investment. That's sometimes minor. We're talking about the other kind of technical support and the structure that's necessary to make these ideas build out. And that's one of the main things that I think we need to focus on. And I feel comfortable, like I said, that with the APP, I can express myself and not have to, tone down my message any, because like I said, we're on the same page in terms of what we want for the development of the majority of Barbadians. I think nobody can disagree. I think too long, there's been a very, like I said, a very small portion of Barbadians. And this is not about color, this is not about race. This is about simply, I'm talking about the majority of people in Barbados are more than consumers. I need Barbadians to understand that we're more than just consumers. We can build, we can invent, we can create, we can sell as well. So I just trying to really push that out there to Barbadians, that they can understand that we need a government who's going to step in and not be unfair to those people who have the wealth or who've had the wealth all the time. Because it's not about that either. Because if we're talking about justice, we can't now come and create a system where we're fair to the majority and then unfair to the minority. That's not the balance and that's not the justice that we're talking about either. So it's about equal opportunity, equal access, and equal growth for everybody. That's the main aim right now.
Okay, so you're basically with the party because you're confident that their approach is about leveling the playing field.
Most definitely.
More so than parties of the past. Now, how are you sure that the APP will not become a part of the political culture of Barbados? I mean, you might not, obviously you can't know that for sure, but what are you seeing? What practices or what approaches are you seeing that, because you do speak a lot about the corruption, the relationship between big corporations and government,
right,
and, integrity and accountability, that's spoken about every campaign, and then nothing is done really,
right,
or minimal
right,
is done.
right.
So what are you seeing that's making you confident that, I'm not joining the same system that I am burning?
Right. Okay, well, for starters, I know that one of the foundations of the corruption that we see a lot in Barbados and across the world is heavily centered around this whole thing about campaign contributions and so on, the financing of a political campaign. And what I would say is that to date, so far, the way that this campaign with the APP is being run is very organic, is very different to what you would expect from a political organization. Granted, this is a new political organization. So as relationships grow, we don't know what will happen. What I would say is that I know what I represent, and I know what I will be a part of and what I won't be a part of. So for me, I'm not too concerned about being sure about the future right now. I'm more concerned about the present, the fact that we have an institution that's saying, look, integrity legislation is something that's important. Parliamentarians revealing the assets, this is something that's important. This is something that the party is committed to as, the first, second, third order of business, making these things happen. Because we've had a government who've had a majority, 30-11, then 29-1, and for some reason, whatever the reason, they were unable to get this legislation passed and so on. And I think it's all about the will. And if we take small steps and we say...
Is it simply the will?
I think so. I honestly do think so. I think if
There's some that would some people would say, I've heard this before in conversations, that it could be, it's one culture, so you don't want to step on toes that could come back and step on yours.
Right. But you see, again, somebody got to be prepared to lose the toes, because at the end of the day, we got people in Barbados who going to sleep hungry. We got people who dying from stress. We got people who dying from diabetes and cancer. There's a lot of things happening in Barbados right now that at the end of the day, we can't be concerned in 2022 about mashing toes. The reality is that, again, 95% in this island are not seeing the same opportunity as the minority. And that is a fundamental problem for me. That's a fundamental problem. Now, I can't be the only person that's having a serious issue with that. I don't think so. I mean, we're dealing with an island who we all know what's happened with slavery. We all know we've come through that as well. And we've seen the government move in the direction of a parliamentary republic and saying, look, we want to shed ourselves of anything that's colonial and so on. But the main thing that's colonial is where you have a majority on an island and a few set of people controlling the wealth and the power and everything. And there's nothing more colonial than that. That is the most colonial thing that we could even imagine, because there's not much difference now between the situation that exists in Barbados now in terms of the way things are and how it was during slavery. What is the difference? We still have a few controlling everything. So at the end of the day, for me, I think the time has come for us to, like I said, is not a time to really be on the fence about certain issues. And one of the things that really brought me into a comfort with the APP is, I made my stance on current public health issues known to the leaders of the party. And, I felt good to know that there's a party, there's a government or a potential government in Barbados who is willing to, I think, respect all Barbadians, not just some. Consultation is important. If we don't consult with the people who have hired us, then again, what are we doing? We need to understand the relationship between the electorate and the politicians, the representatives. That's one of the things that I really want people to understand, because you as the boss, meaning the public, you're hiring me or hiring my representative to, speak on your issues, bring development programs, run the country and so on. And then politicians get into office and they forget about the people who sent them to parliament. Again, to me, that's ludicrous. That's madness. There needs to be something done about the way that, because I've seen for a number of years in Barbados where it happens all the time. A government wins the election, they go into parliament, and then the big news that everybody is waiting on is to hear who get which ministry. That's the big news. That then become the big talking point. Who's minister of this? Who's minister of that? And for me, this is where the breakdown is coming in our society. This is where the problem is coming, because you just sent some person to parliament to represent a constituency. And as soon as they get to parliament, their focus immediately shifts to not their constituency. It shifts now to what ministry can I get? And if the leader of the party doesn't grant that person a ministry, all hell gonna break loose. Somebody offended, somebody vexed. So if we don't start to attack the culture, and I mean really attack it, we're gonna have a repeat of the same cycle that we've been in for the last 50, 60 years. So that's pretty much it in terms of my understanding of the type of representation that the APP wants to bring to the public. I've assigned to that. I feel comfortable with it currently. And I can't tell the future, Tef, but what I would say to Barbadians, if I see this political organization going down the same road as the other two that I've criticized all these years, like, resign. It's not difficult to take yourself away, So that's one commitment that I can give, that I know for a fact that if I find myself in a situation where I'm a part of the same system that I've criticized all these years, then for me, again, it's not difficult to step away and allow your movement away to be the indicator that something has gone wrong.
Right, but for the time being, you guys have stuff in common that you can align yourself with.
Yeah, most definitely.
So, I understand. So we're going to take a look now at your manifesto.
Okay.
You focused on 5 specific areas: agriculture, entrepreneurship, sports, technology, and community activities.
Yeah.
Right? Things that you've always been preaching about. I'm going to read just a quick portion of the agriculture part.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to advocate for plots of land to be allocated for residents to farm, raise livestock, and explore new techniques in the industry, not as workers, but owners of their produce. Also, a major part of agriculture is the ongoing development of the medical cannabis industry. Cannabis cultivation has been a major part of the St. John landscape for more than 50 years, and while I endorse the allocation of land at Bath to the Rastafari community, I will be also advocating that traditional farmers of St. John, similarly persecuted, are also able to benefit in this area. That is directly from your manifesto.
Yeah.
Okay, so first I have 2 questions. Why should St. John residents be exempt from the licenses as opposed to any other farmer in Barbados? I know you did touch on the fact that it is a central thing here, but you can continue on.
Okay, so I think that's a good question. People would ask, well, why, I think the people in St. John deserve, to have, this olive leaf extended, so to speak, from the government. And I want to say to Barbadians that if we're honest with ourselves about the history of Barbados, we're talking about a parish that has been cultivating cannabis for more than 5 decades, unbroken, every year for 50 years or more. And as a resident, I've seen a number of people either incarcerated, injured. They've been, had to pay fines to the courts and so on. I've seen people who don't even deal with cannabis been on the receiving end of harassment just by maybe having a J plate. You're driving home and you got a J plate and the police assume that because it marked J, you're from St. John and you're dealing with cannabis and you get pulled over. That's stigmatization. So at the end of the day, the residents of St. John have been, I think, persecuted for a number of years for cannabis. Like if we're real, and we look in the papers and so on, we've been hearing, raids, confiscation. We see the photos with the police, got the cannabis on the back of the truck and so on. There was even a time where there was an article highlighting the hot spots for cannabis cultivation in Barbados. And you had the big red spot over St. John, obviously parts of St. Joseph and St. Andrew and so on. So we notice something that happens all over Barbados. But we know historically that cannabis cultivation has been a part of the St. John landscape for a number of years. And cannabis is illegal. Cannabis cultivation and so on is illegal in Barbados. We know the history of that as well in Barbados. But where this has gone in the wrong direction for me now is that we have parliamentarians in parliament who talk about cannabis openly. There's a medicinal cannabis licensing authority in Barbados functioning as we speak, with Chantal Monroe Knight as the head of that organization. So as illegal as it is still being looked upon. It's still, at the end of the day, we're in a framework, we're in a gray area now, where there's medical cannabis and there's recreational and so on, but it's still the same plant. So I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to get into that, but I do know at the end of the day what the government is talking about, what the investors overseas are coming to Barbados and looking at the land and, testing the soil, what they're talking about, what they're getting ready to pretty much invest in is the same thing that these guys in St. John have been doing for all these years. So my thing is, if we're going to be, again, seeking justice and we're going to be dealing with something that's fair and we want it to be seen as though what is good for over here is good for over here, I think we need to be honest about that. So given just the historical evidence of how long the guys in St. John have been planting cannabis, I feel so passionate about this that I don't even think anybody who is running for office in St. John and is not willing to look into what the farmers in St. John have endured for all these years, they do not deserve the right to represent this parish. So I know some people would say, well, cannabis is illegal and you got to be careful of. At the end of the day, the government, the last administration, they've broken the ice. 14 grams or whatever the case may be, that is decriminalized to an extent, which we also have issues with that because part of that legislation is still tricky because you're saying to me it's decriminalized, but still, I can get a ticket. If I don't pay that ticket in 30 days, then I go to court. And also mixed up in that is the counseling part.
Is that even in effect as yet?
Well, it's in effect to the sense where it's on the books, but the gray area again, like I said,
I feel like I've seen people get charged for small amounts.
Again, this is what I'm saying, is that the counseling, if you refuse the counseling, this is the part that nobody's really talking about. Now, there are many people in Barbados who are productive citizens who may use cannabis, and over a period of time, maybe they would have, get caught up with the law or whatever the case may be. So we're not just talking about expunging the records of people who have cannabis misdemeanors. So if some person commits a larger crime, murder, rape or something, and has a cannabis charge, I'm not saying remove that from off that person's record. I'm talking about some person who simply has, you can look at that person's record and see the only time that they've been involved with the law is because of cannabis. Planting a tree somewhere in the house, something like that. We need to make sure that we don't ostracize and criminalize those people any longer.
That's basically the approach that the United States took, or at least what it said was part of the reason.
Right.
Was a lot of college students.
Correct.
Who have nothing else against their name but charges for that. So that
and we have similar situations here in Barbados. So like I said, there's some people who would use cannabis and not agree going to counseling because in their mind, they're fine, they're good, they're okay. So I think the government needs to, we really need to be honest about the reality in Barbados, the culture. We need to look at the culture overall. And outside of cannabis now, part of the culture in Barbados is agriculture. We have tons of people in Barbados, especially in this parish, who understand the cultivation of yams, potatoes, cassava, They understand how to raise animals, cows, sheep, chicken, you name it. And what they don't have may be either the land or the facilitation to grow these businesses. So that's one of the things that we want to talk about, because a large portion of residents in St. John came through the plantation system. That's straight talk. Our grandparents worked on these plantations in St. John. And to live in St. John now and see the land idle, and to also see people unemployed, that doesn't make sense. So you got idle land, you have people who are unemployed that can farm. So it's a no-brainer. Make sure that you can facilitate some of the residents utilizing this land to grow food, whether you want to turn over the land to them. That's a bit more technical and tricky, but you can lease land at affordable prices and at least facilitate people with water, irrigation, and so on, to make sure that in the absence of being able to create just jobs, you can actually have people do something that they're good at, something that they love, and see a transformation in the society. So it's not just about focusing on cannabis overall, because at the end of the day, like I said, food sustainability, agriculture is something that's very expansive. It's not just, it's not just vegetables. We can talk about fruits, then you can talk about herbs, you can talk about microgreens. Agriculture is very expansive. There are a lot of different things in agriculture that we can talk about.
So it really boils down to the leasing of the land and irrigation.
Yeah, for sure.
I figure
that's
the rest
important.
is up to the farmer, really.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay. And if you give the guys in St. John a chance, if you come and you give the guys in St. John a chance and they fail, that's not even a concern of mine, because at the end of the day, let history record that the government is now dealing with something that they were persecuting, locking up, running down people for, and they're still doing it. So again, it's hypocrisy. That's the only way that I can really see it. It's hypocrisy. So I think what I really want is that regardless of what happens in the upcoming election, whoever takes power really needs to come into St. John, meet some of these farmers. I've been hearing a lot of talk about a seed amnesty and trying to relax it, because if you've been locking up guys and running down guys and guys fearing for their life all these years, you can't just come and say, all right, fellas, come. We don't want to lock you up no more. Come and talk to us. It doesn't work like that, because there's going to be a lack of trust, obviously, there between the authorities and the people who've been risking their lives all these years. So there really needs to be a forum where the government can say, look, this is what we're doing. We recognize that we would have been persecuting you guys for cannabis cultivation for a number of years. We're about to go in a direction where we too want to get involved in the industry, whether it be accepting money from investors, whether it be in whatever capacity. What we do know is that we were persecuting sections of the population before for something that we're now dealing with. So we need to find something where we can come to a common ground. And even if the government doesn't want to apologize and say, sorry, at least let the actions and let the programs that you facilitate speak to some sort of a change in mindset. So that's the main thing for me.
What about the occurrence of those being assigned to developing the industry being foreign entities?
Right.
Now, you spoke on ownership in the manifesto as part of what you're looking at. And definitely, there are other forms of agriculture, like we said. Obviously, those actually come first to me, the food for the community, right?
Definitely.
I personally, just from research and understanding, would understand now in the cannabis market, in order to compete, you got entities overseas that produce at the highest level in terms of they have the control conditions and the output levels where they're able to form relationships with the retailers more easily, right? So there is a need for some involvement of overseas if you want to compete in the foreign market, just to understand how it works. So how do you see something like that working out, where guys that have been going through this for decades, like you said, up to 5 decades or more, how are they going to be able to benefit and get some type of ownership while working in tandem with those from overseas so that you can actually compete in the market?
Right. Again, I think a lot of work needs to be done in terms of how government is formulating the industry and their approach to the industry. Because like I said, one of the confusing things for a lot of people is the way that the quote-unquote system has decided to split the cannabis plant. So when you talk about medical and when you talk about recreation and so on, there's some people who would say, well, we believe in whole plant. There's some people within the industry who believe in the whole plant theory, that depending on the strain or whatever the case may be, you extract, and what you extract, you test it, and then you go from there. So you're hunting basically whole plant and seeing what's good, what's not good, and so on. But again, what's good and what's not good. If we look at Jamaica, I want to talk about Marshall Emmanuel for a second, where one of the challenges, again, that we have in the society, and not just Barbados, but Caribbean, is that we think foreign means better research, foreign means better quality. And that's unfortunate, because here in Barbados and the Caribbean, we have people who live it, who've done their own research, and not just research, but research that's applicable and relevant to our sun, to our soil, to our water, to our body. So we need to, I think, put local research and Caribbean research at the forefront of what it is that we're doing. Because Marshall already has said he's determined what are the territories in the Caribbean that are best suited to plant hemp, or the territories that are best suited to go after recreational use and so on. There's already been a CARICOM commission who've done a report advising governments on the way to roll out and also ensure that the people who've been victimized get justice. So I think when we talk about foreign investment, that's if we're looking to, I would say, formulate our industry based solely around how the international standards are set. If the government...
Well, that would be if you're looking to export to those international territories.
Correct. But if it is that the government is looking to, I would say, tailor an industry based on the needs, the supply and demand of local territories, if they're willing to respect the actual culture of their own citizens, they would find that you can have a viable industry without even looking outside. What you will have is a product that people now have to come here to experience. So I think it's just, again, fixing the mindset, because sometimes when we hear, again, this is something that I wanted to address, the government would push back at some of the things that I'm saying and say, well, it's not that we're not allowing local people to get involved. There are local people involved. But I want to take it a step further, because we have local millionaires in Barbados who can snap their finger and get involved in the industry, who were not part of the persecution that I'm talking about. So when I'm talking about local involvement, I need people to understand that it's not just about whether a Bajan can get a license or get involved. We need to be specific when we talk about local. When I say local, I mean grassroots, the people who, like I said, have suffered for a number of years. And I gotta make this point, Tef, that I'm happy that the Rastafari community got the land just down the hill at Bath. That's something that I was overjoyed about. I've been to Akebulan, I've done interviews with the guys down there. I've spoken to Rashiba, who is part of, that's ICAR, this is on the above side. So those guys deserve it. But if we look at Barbados' history, the only people in Barbados who have been persecuted more than Rastafari for cannabis are the farmers in St. John. And I say that without anybody having the opportunity to say, man, you're wrong, or no way. I am telling you, Tef, that the only people in Barbados that have faced more persecution for cannabis than Rastafari are the St. John farmers. And I stand by that. I stand by that, Tef. That's a fact.
All right, definitely a road we could continue to go down, but I definitely like the answers that I've been hearing from you regarding that topic. So as to not stretch the interview too far, I'm going to bundle two of the areas from your manifesto in one question, and that would be entrepreneurship and technology.
Right.
Two things that you're looking at that you definitely want to see developed in St. John.
Yeah, pronto.
Right?
Very fast.
What I will ask is, and we're going to talk about COVID later, but how do you plan to literally effectively teach residents and the youth? I know you focus on youth specifically, even though you have a portion definitely in your manifesto for the elderly. How do you plan to teach the youth effectively? How do you plan to create that opportunity that they learn technology and entrepreneurship so that they can mobilize?
Right. Okay, so one of the things that we see now is that, a lot of youth were pretty much thrown in at the deep end when it comes to online school and so on. And as we know, Barbados has, I would say, high internet usage, but in terms of understanding technology, is not really at the same level, I would say. So one of the things that I've been trying to focus on is, like I said, entrepreneurship and technology. There are a lot of people who are at home, and there's several ways that you can make money from a phone. There's several businesses that you can start from a mobile device or, using the internet and so on. So I often use the analysis in terms of we have youth who want to play video games, and then we have youth who would want to build a video game. So we need to make sure that their basic programs and understanding the back end of computing. So we're talking about coding, robotics, and so on. Because we don't know if there's somebody who is going to go into that experience of learning coding, learning robotics, and understand it immediately, enjoy it, and get a knack for it. So that's one of the things that we wanted to do. Introduce some of the topics that are happening at, secondary school, and bring them into the community for some of these students who may not be going to a secondary school that's doing robotics. So it's about exposing, I would say, the young people in the community to the back end of computing. That's important.
So we're looking at workshops.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely workshops.
Right.
One of the things that we're doing currently is having a free Wi-Fi zone set up in Gore Hill. And I know a lot of the residents will say, well, why Gore Hill first? That's pretty much following the tradition of starting a lot of things in the Gore Hill area. But that's one of the places where we have most of the activity currently. People go walking on mornings, people play football in the evening, there's road tennis happening and so on in the area. So that's one of the places that I wanted to start the Wi-Fi zone, to be able to bring youth out in that area. And, unfortunately, I'm not able to mention the name of the person who's going to be doing the robotics, but that's the nature of politics right now. There are a lot of people supporting my campaign with their resources and so on, their talents, but they don't want to be identified. I understand that, I appreciate that. But that's one of the things that residents in the parish can look forward to. We're only going to be starting with 8 to 10 students at a time, because, like I said, we need to keep it, kind of small, that we can make it as impactful as possible. And that's one of the things that we're going to be starting on. Mainly.
Oh, you answered my next question with that, because I was wondering, I wanted you to flesh it out a bit more, because I know definitely if you're looking at educating the youth in the community, bringing something from school to community,
right.
You have to look at workshops, and then you have to look at the extension from the workshops, how they're going to continue on learning. And clearly you've made some moves and put some things in place.
And on that point too, Tef, there's, this whole thing about technology, prior to the election being called, I had an experience with a friend of mine, his daughter. She's about, I would say, 5'6". But I went by their house, and I had on a Catch a Fire shirt at the time. And, they watch my program, they support me a lot. And his daughter said, you wearing merch? And it had me, this level is 6 years old, And she says, you wearing merch? And I paused for a long time, because I was like, she just said merch.
Buzzword.
Right? And I said, so what do you know about merch? And she said to me, I watch Rachel and Perry, some YouTube show that she watches with, these two girls from overseas who have their own YouTube channel and they have merch and so on. And it really shocked me, because that's the way we are living right now. You have a 6-year-old girl who understands merch, who wants to do hoodies, and she wants to do t-shirts. And, she said to me, and because of me, you're going to be rich, because you're only doing t-shirts. You should got hoodies, and, you should got hats. And she was giving me the whole spiel about merch and how you connect merch to your content on YouTube. And she's 6 years old. And I am telling you, there's nothing within the syllabus at the schools right now, primary or secondary, that is going to fundamentally teach a youth about merchandising and digitizing content and monetization online and so on. We don't have that. But look at what our youth are into. They're being trained by YouTube influencers who have similar interests as them. I think these two girls that she was watching, I think were doing makeup or hair or whatever they were doing though. That's what she's into, and she's following their channel. And from that, she's picking up and looking at the model that they're putting out to you about how to make money, how to interact with your audience and so on. So I think it's a new day in Barbados when it comes to youth and what youth want to do. And, like I said, it's not so much about the ideas that we have for the youth, but more so trying to really figure out what these guys are into and trying to facilitate as best as possible.
I think that's a really noble cause, man. To actually see that executed would be legendary. You also speak on, and I mean, a lot of these ideas tie into community activities.
That's the foundation. That's the foundation.
So I can't even specifically get into community activities because it's broad across all these things. There's also sports.
Passionate about that for sure. That's another avenue to really liberate the youth.
So talk to me as briefly as you can. Tell me how you plan to affect sports in St. John.
Right, sports.
As far as it, because sports has many sides to it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's the mental, you know, it builds some mental fortitude,
Mm-hmm.
understanding working with teams and people,
Mm-hmm.
and getting past issues and problems. And there's the physical aspect, you know, you can maintain your fitness
Mm-hmm.
if you have a busy lifestyle. And then there's the entrepreneurship of it. There are opportunities for youth to, that's one of the biggest markets in the world. We see in all these LeBron James and
Right.
even the cricketers from the West Indies,
Mhm.
all these people making ridiculous money. We got Darian King playing tennis. We
Mhm.
got, I could continue to list. So
Yeah.
what were your plans for St. John and sports development?
Right. So with sports development, one of the major plans for St. John right now is there's already a football program, big respect to Bernard and Evans. Those guys have been dedicated on a level that I can't even explain when it comes to the youth on football in St. John. So trying to get some immediate support for their program is important, because when we talk about youth development and sports, you know, a youth who is, or some person who's 25, 26, 27, 28, in the world of sports, that's old in the world of sports. So if we're going to be talking about sport and development in St. John, I'm really trying to focus now on 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5, 6, 7, that primary school age, in core sports, cricket, road tennis, and football. Because road tennis, we know, on the trajectory that it's on, is going to develop into something very big locally. And I think if St. John wants to be represented on the local stage in road tennis, we need to, you know, get something going where we have very, very, very young students involved in road tennis. So that's one of the main things. I'll tell you what disappointed me most about both administrations. You know, sports is something that I am passionate about. You know, I would have been to trials for the Barbados cricket team on the 19 and so on, played cricket at the highest level in Barbados. And it was not a job. You know, as a cricketer in Barbados or as a footballer, you are pretty much integral to the management and the financing of your club, of the entity that you're representing. Because, you know, that's how it works. Club members pay subs and so on. They unite, they pay the umpires, they get balls, they maintain the facility. That's how sports has been managed in Barbados for a number of years by, you know, the club members. It's not really gone to a level where it's professional, to the point where, you know, you could actually walk down the road and see some person and say, what are you doing now? And the person says, well, I'm a footballer. I play for Notre Dame or I play for Paradise. We got to get to that level. And I was really excited when initially the late Prime Minister David Thompson started the constituency football tournament. You know, $30,000, all the constituencies represented and so on. You get a stipend for playing, there's prize money for most goals, etc. And following that, there was also the Line Pelican, introduced by the Prime Minister, Mia Motley. And, you know, both of these tournaments, it transformed Barbados in a way that, I mean, if you're talking about the economy in terms of people going again to Hairdo to go to these stadiums to watch a game, boots go sell, vending, taxi men working, there's outside the players now who are actually involved. There's something that was highly beneficial for the society. And even before COVID's arrival, both these tournaments came to a halt. And it's something that I was very upset about, because I understood the significance of it. I understood and I saw what was happening in the community, how excited people were, young people. So I think we're missing the boat with sports. Sports is something that you have approximately, I would say about 3,000 to 3,500 young people in the school system. That's leaving primary school, doing 11 plus, going into first form. You got another 3,000 going into second, third, fourth, fifth, up the line. And everybody cannot be academically inclined. Everybody cannot be academically inclined. There are people who want to play sports, who are very good at playing sports. And if we don't find a semi-professional environment, by the age of 19, 20, they're going to be frustrated with sports. Because they're now going to look for survival. So you can't keep a youth focused on sports if that sport is not providing an income for him in today's society. You know, gone are those days.
I think a lot less youth are playing sports right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Less,
but how can they?
Like a significant amount.
How can they? You go look for a daily bread.
Significant number.
If you're not getting a daily bread from the sport that you love, it's only that far that you're going to take your interest in that sport. So I think we're failing the youth in that regard, and I could easily see us immediately saving about 2,000 young people in Barbados if we create a semi-professional environment. And I'm not talking about arts and culture now and the involvement of COSGAP and the NCF. That's a whole different ball game altogether now. When we're talking about talents in that regard, I'm just talking about sports. It's something where we could literally save 2,000 young people in Barbados, and that is 2,000 young people on a constant roster if we get them involved and we, kind of get these sports organized in a professional manner.
I think it's actually interesting that you actually brought up the Lane Pelican football tournament. I didn't have this as a question, no, but it just made me think, because even my fellow friend here, Shez, videographer here on the site,
Respect, brother.
we always talk about, or we have spoken before about football, how there's always an element, there's always going to be a small element of, let's say, violence, because it's a competitive sport. It's something competitive. It's tribal in nature, right? And how larger territories, they cater for this. They know that's going to be a part of it, but they understand how big the industry could be, and the benefits outweigh the negatives, right? And I think like you said, when Lane Pelican football, when that tournament was going on, you were getting like $150 a match. You're getting paid to go to practice. You know what I mean? There's a huge difference for a man that just saying no, he blocked because he
Big difference.
Because his skill is football, and his skill doesn't happen to have an industry immediately around him. What do you think about that same situation? Because I think Lane Pelican went without any incident, and I think after the finals, maybe you can help me because I can't remember exactly what happened. I think after the finals, it wasn't even in the arena. It was
Right, it was something.
It was something nearby.
Again, these are things that would always happen. And again, like everything else, again, cricket is a sport where we've had incidences after cricket at Kensington already, and it would not draw the same, that same level of spotlight again, because football is a sport that's heavily supported, by the masses. I think is really a big spectator sport. So even when we look at, like you mentioned, the international tournaments and so on, you have, fans. They take this thing really, really serious. And you may find it's unfortunate, but you may find Barbadians more passionate about Manchester United or Liverpool more so than a Notre Dame or a Paradise or a St. John Sonnets. So for me, it's about building out.
I guilty of the same.
Yeah, it's about building out and creating stars in Barbados, because again, this is where the relationship between the private sector, these large corporate entities, and government can really become something that's solid and something that's fruitful. So we don't want a situation where large corporations are just, pumping campaign financing into a political party without structure. What we want is for a government to be intelligent and responsible and say, look, we don't want your campaign money, but what we do want is for you to purchase a team, to come into a semi-professional structure in our country where there's going to be mutual benefit. So you're investing in a community club, and what you're getting in exchange is your name on the shirt. The tournament is going to be televised. You're going to paint your logo on the playing field. So there's already business models that exist internationally that if we localize this approach, there's going to be something that's going to kick off in Barbados that's going to be excellent for everybody. It's going to be excellent for young people, for people who want to get involved, not just in playing, but nutritionists. There's so many different ways that if we just focus on building out a sporting industry in Barbados, that everybody can benefit. So a company can come and invest $300,000 in a team and know that over 5 to 10 years or whatever the case, they're going to get benefit. They're going to see marketing value, advertising value. You're going to sell merchandise. So there's so many ways that we could really kick off something major in Barbados. Like I said, we just need the will, Tef. That's the main thing that's missing, the will.
You're talking about some interesting ideas, man. I really wish we could push it further, but you really don't want to stretch the interview too far. Yeah. The next topic I was going to touch on was community activities, but your premise seems to be so aligned that you kind of touch on all the community activities while speaking on the other areas.
Right.
So I don't really think we need to dive much into that. I think we're pretty aware of your notion that youth need to be engaged. to be productive in society and do less negative things, right? Less negative output.
Just engage them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you could just give me literally like a couple sentences on that. Just where you lay on community activities,
Right. Well,
St. John specifically.
for me, the way that we've been taking the approach to development in Barbados is, kind of from the top down. Everybody's concerned about corruption and not just corruption, but, concerned about, the way that the public sector operates, saying, government workers, they go work and they lag and you can't get anything done on time and so on. And for me, if it is that we are prepared to, I think, set the example from a government perspective, if people see government being prudent and people see politicians being more resourceful, tapping into the grassroots, being more organized, looking to, cut expenditure and so on. If people see that approach coming from the top, if people see a government trying to be efficient and functioning a certain way, you're not going to have to really tell the workers anything. They're going to, kind of feel the energy, pick up that energy. So we need to do, if we want to really lift up the working class, lift up the masses, is to focus on the grassroots. That's where we need to focus. I think if we build out Barbados from each constituency, if we focus on it that way, it's still Barbados. So, to representatives, if you're going to a constituency and let's say you don't get a ministry, if you're focused in your constituency and you have ideas and you have a vision for your constituency, that's going to make you pretty much involved with MTW, Waterworks, the NCF, because you're going to be crossing borders with all of these different public entities. So for me, that's the main thing that I would like to see right now in Barbados, where we allow the permanent secretaries, we allow the senior officials within government departments to come to the fore, to show their brilliance. I would like to hear ministers less and hear more from the people who are actually hands-on and building Barbados, because like I said, government is a continuum. The election has been called and there's not a politician sitting in parliament right now. Every politician is out in the road doing something to get back a seat. But the government's still running. You can still go and pay your license right now. You can still go. Government's still functioning. True. So how important are these guys to the overall governance?
I mean, they could be important, but I understand where you're coming from.
You understand where I'm coming from? So I just want to see, I think, representatives right now get back to the constituencies, the grassroots level, and reaching out to the youth in this nation, reaching out to the mothers, to the fathers, to the elderly, and just focusing on the grassroots. That's the
elderly. That's actually my second last point. So let's touch on the elderly. You are a very youth-based. The youth is your focus.
Right.
That's clear.
Right.
But there are the elderly in the society. So as the second last point that we're going to touch on, just tell me if I'm an older constituent, and I see this young man with all these brilliant ideas, want to take St. John forward, and I'm happy that he has all these ideas for the youth. What about me?
Right. Right. So the elderly now, my main thing with the elderly is about care, is about trying to get to the elderly to find out exactly what it is that they need, if it is that they have, because every elderly is not neglected. There's some elderly who are in some very wholesome environments with family and so on. It's just, again, research, finding out who needs what level of assistance. But for me, the main thing about the elderly outreach is really the knowledge. The elderly in St. John and all the other parishes have been through so much, good and bad, and they have so much to share. So it's about connecting the youth and the elderly right now. And the perfect example of that for me is what I experienced recently on the campaign trail in College Savannah, where we have the older folks up there who have all this knowledge about diving and so on and fishing. And, their primary concern right now is being able to share that knowledge with the next generation. They're passionate about that. So for me, that's the elderly outreach, being able to...
You have your ideas of facilitating that as well?
Yeah, well, right now, I would say the idea is about going now to, some of the businesses in St. John. And that's how, as some person who doesn't have this big party machinery behind me, my approach is really going to be one of crowdfunding, getting, people to support the initiatives. That way, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses in St. John who are going to be eager to support some of these initiatives. They started already, where, you just have to take the information to them. They can possibly maybe, reach out to some of these businesses direct and get things done and so on. So that's the main things, to get things like, spares, body suits, the flippers, the goggles, the tanks. So the guys already know what they need. And the main thing is, like I said, the will. So we have the older folks already willing to work with the younger generation. And the younger guys are willing to work with these guys to learn the craft as well. So that's the main thing.
I guess any extra administration needed, your office, if you were to get him, would be able to assist with that as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, so lastly, I'm going to touch on the topic that runs the world right now. I don't even know what question to ask regarding this topic, but COVID-19.
COVID-19.
Man, so many different. This is its own interview, but I think I can boil it down to two things I'm going to ask. Two things specifically, just so that we can manage this time, because we could go everywhere with this. If you are currently a part of the government, what changes? Obviously, you're not a scientist, you're not a doctor, you're not a pathologist, you're not a virologist, but you're a human being. And, you have some understanding of human behavior and a whole heap of other topics. What would you change based on your knowledge and understanding about the approach as a nation to COVID from a governmental standpoint?
Right. What would they change? Okay, so let me see if I can give you a responsible response to this. Okay, so
Always.
so look at it this way. Barbados, like any other country, is part of the world. We're all, I'm a Barbadian, but still I'm a global citizen. And while I understand global protocols, I understand when you're part of these, you're signatories to certain things and treaties and so on. You abide by the rules and you operate as a global citizen. That's what you do as a member of these organizations and so on. What I'm most disappointed about is, in terms of the approach from government and from some of the governments in the region, is I think the stress that they've brought on to some members of the population with the approach. So my thing is, during a pandemic, COVID-19, and I think it is the responsibility of every government to make sure that if you have citizens who want to be vaccinated, that you do your utmost best to provide a vaccination program for those citizens. At the same time, you also have citizens who don't want to take the vaccine. They deserve the same level of respect and care that you would give to anybody else. But what they need to do, and what you need to do, is to make sure that you have a protocol policy that's very solid. And I think Barbados has that, where we understand the importance of sanitization, the importance of wearing a mask, the importance of social distancing, the importance of, temperature checks and so on, and overall good hygiene. If you cough, put your hand to your mouth. If you sneeze, etc., when you're finished with the tissue, you throw it away. So these are all things that we would have assigned to as a nation long before COVID, in terms of being hygienic. We're clean people. So for me, that's been the major concern for me, that we've seen, I think, a very aggressive approach from not just government, but from some private entities who, they've kind of put some of the workers in a strong position. So we don't know now how many Barbadians would have taken the vaccine out of fear, because they don't want to lose a job, because they don't want to be stressed out, as opposed to the people who genuinely believe in that form of medicine and willfully just went and take the vaccine and so on. So my thing is that the approach has to be governed by balance. It has to be governed by respect, because, again, there are people in Barbados who have very powerful herbs planted in the yard, who they trust that. They trust the sunlight. They trust to get up on mornings and go jogging. They eat well. They look after their health. They take full responsibility for their health and so on. So we need to, and they're Barbadians. So I don't think we need to make them an enemy of the state for the choice that they make. I think we need to really, like I said, government's role is to facilitate, be a government for everybody. And there's some people who want to take the vaccine, they trust the technology, they want to travel and so on without any hindrances. Make sure that we have a vaccine program that's functioning, that's ready to facilitate those people. And at the same time, respect our citizens who don't want to take a vaccine and so on. Make sure that we follow the safety protocols that have pretty much served us prior to the arrival of the vaccine. I want people to remember that prior to the arrival of the vaccine, the nurses, the doctors, everybody were assigned to a set of protocols that kept Barbados safe. And that's where I think everyone first has to put their confidence any protocols. And then after that, we provide for every citizen, not just some, but make sure that everybody is represented.
Man, you just mentioned the nurses, and I feel like asking another. It's too many questions, but I'm going to end with this last question because it's kind of full circle for you because you are a huge. Well, rather you have a big investment in pushing Bajan music,
Yeah,
local music. That's your thing. You're synonymous with that from the time I know you till now.
I love it.
Through all the changes and all the other developments in your life, that was always and still is a big part of you. You believe in Bajan music. No.
Yeah.
COVID got everything shut down.
Mm-hmm.
I know you are just running for the constituency for the time being, but if you were to get in and get your feet wet and you have more leverage, how would you like to have fat entertainment in Barbados? No. I know that's very broad. So let's bring it back to the final topic, which is COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, COVID has everything shut down. So, and this is your going out here now. So, don't make it. Explain as much as you can without getting long and winding, because I know this is a very passionate topic for you.
All right. So, entertainment is something that's, again, as passionate as I am about sports and sports development, entertainment is just another gateway for liberation for youth in Barbados. Like, that is a liberating tool. There's no doubt about it. And I think what I've realized over a number of years in Barbados is that we are able to promote soca and promote stars and create hit songs in 8 weeks, 2 months in a crop over cycle. And I've never seen the same respect and the same dedication to the other genres in Barbados. So while I understand, calypso, soca music, that sort of thing, crop over and so on, I've always tried to, shift my attention to promoting the other genres because music is something that's universal. So I always tell people, people don't say that Gentleman is sing German reggae or that Two-Face Idibia sings Nigerian reggae. Those people are assigned to a genre of music and they're respected for it. The same way a LR or the same way a Tef. I just see you guys as artists singing a genre. So for me, to get more leverage in Barbados right now would simply just look like COSCAP and the NCF and radio stations understanding that we need to build an industry, that we need to create something vibrant locally first before, it's just to fight against the mindset that, if I don't make it on the Billboard charts, I've not made it as an artist. When we need to facilitate local development, local stardom, we need to make sure we have our own charts. So it's all about building out an industry in Barbados that's independent. So whether or not an artist is signed to a global agency or so on, it would make little difference to that artist because locally, we've designed a structure where that person can eat from royalties, that person can eat from stage shows, that person can eat from merchandise sales because we've developed an industry that creates stars. We look at our own as stars. The same way that I can drive in my car and listen to Sizzla Kalonji, I can listen to a Buggy Nakentia right after Sizzla and not feel as though I've lowered my standard. It's the same output, it's the same effort, it's the same artist.
I think because in numbers here, we have 300,000 people here.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think the focus should be on the Caribbean as one territory, even more so than just locally. Because yes, you will be able to get people making a living, but even using these numbers, I also feel like only so many people can make a living here,
right,
off these numbers. Obviously, you can continue to develop the structure where more and more people benefit. But I personally think it's a Caribbean thing. But obviously, you have to start locally.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, again, like I said, for me, the local, and again, you use that word loosely because
homegrown.
Yeah, homegrown. For me, it's all about getting Barbadians to, back to a place where they understand that we need to have trust and confidence and respecting in what is homegrown. Outside, quote unquote, international does not necessarily mean a better product. And I think once we can dismantle that mindset of thinking that some person who comes from overseas is better skilled or a product that comes from overseas, would taste better. Once we can understand that there's brilliance in things that are locally made, locally produced, I think that's going to be the start of something magnificent in Barbados.
I mean, just to take it out too on that same topic, I personally thought it was very interesting to see artists plastered on the front page for their freedom of speech, regardless of what you think was right or wrong about what they were saying in their music. I feel like from the time you start to limit freedom of speech in a society, that is the beginning of the end and the breakdown. You know, you going down a slippery slope from there, right?
Most definitely.
Controlling freedom of speech. But it's interesting to see some of those same artists being used in campaigns. No.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me because that's something that, again, the last time where we had this issue where the artists were chastised for some of the lyrics on the Trojan rhythm and so on, it was disappointing for me because I saw it as an attack on the culture. I saw it as an attack on the people who understand and love reggae and dancehall. And I'm going to close on this because I love reggae music. I love Rastafari. I love Pan-Africanism and so on. And this is a music, this is an art form that, I call it the defender. This is the defender. When you talk about reggae and dancehall, this is a music that attacks the issues. It speaks about oppression. It wants to see upliftment. It wants to see that social upward mobility. That's the genre for me that I cling to when I want to be inspired to work. That's the genre that I cling to. And I think it was unfortunate that we don't understand that dancehall and reggae music, yes, they're born out of Jamaica, but we need to remember that Jackie Opel is a Barbadian. He's one of the founding fathers of the ska and all the roots music that people love today. So again, this is our music, this is our culture, and we need to embrace it and embrace it fully. And that is just one of the main things that I would like to see going forward, that we recognize that there are people who singing all types of music and they're Barbadian. They belong to us. These are our people. If a person doesn't want to sing soca, that's fine. But let's give them all the support that they need to be able to reach their dreams, and make their dreams come true. That's the main thing. I really appreciate your time, Tef.
Yeah,
Thanks
it was
a lot,
great.
man.
It was great talking to you today, man.
I normally the person asking the questions, so this was a little strange for me. So I really appreciate it.
You ever see the Spider-Man meme when
Yeah, and to all entrepreneurs out there, I just want you guys to recognize that it's not easy being an entrepreneur in Barbados, but regardless of how much times you try and fail, succeed, just keep going.